Thanks for the generous introduction. I'm happy to be here. I live in Bangalore. I just got here a couple of hours back. And I want to thank Nagini for getting me here because I was at the last year PMI national conference at Mumbai when she asked me. She booked me already like 6 months before this event and said, no, you have to come here. So the expectations I know are like as high as the roof of this room here. So I'll try to share some stories and hopefully we'll all have a little bit of fun there. So the topic I chose for today is recalibrating project management in the era of knowledge, design, creativity, and innovation. Sounds like a lot of words here, but basically I want to examine project management in today's world. How relevant are some of the principles that you and I subscribe to, right? So one question to all of you here. I'm assuming all of you are some kind of a project management practitioner. Forget about the certifications and all, but you are some kind of a practitioner here. Just raise your hand how happy you are with the state of project management that you practice. And just be honest there. I think you are being a little too hard to yourself because I don't see any hand going up here. How many of you are happy with the state of project management? When I say state of project management, it is the way you manage your projects. It's the kind of tools that you use. It's the kind of results that you deliver. It's the kind of customer satisfaction that you create for your customers. So your hand goes up if you are happy with that. Okay. So less than about 15–20% probably. Okay. I was actually prepared for a second question in case the number of hands was 80%. I'll still go ahead with that question. How many of your families are happy with your state of project management? I've always taken that as a test because my wife, even 20 years after our marriage, she does not believe. She says, you software guys do not know how to do project management. Because it so happened that I got married, and after that, within a month, I said, my boss said, I used to be at Philips, and he said, you have to go to Sweden, and you have to be there just for a month, and you will be back in a month. And poor her, I mean, she just was sold on that promise that within a month, I'll be back. The month became second month and 3 months, and she was like, what kind of planning do you guys do? So she has been actually the biggest critic and someone who keeps me honest in terms of, hey, is your project management good enough or not? And the second test was actually my boss in one of the companies, and this might be a little bit, we are all grown up, so this might be a little bit sexist in that sense, but I'll still go ahead and do that. He used to say, if you are not home by 7 o'clock and taking care of your wife, somebody else will. So with that context, I just want to talk about project management in a very different point of view. Because today's world, we are really solving a very different set of problems. We are not really solving problems that are always very well-bounded. We are solving problems that are dealing a lot with knowledge, with creativity, with design, with innovation. So is project management really in the same shape, form, and factor applicable to the kind of problems we are solving? And I just want to examine it with all of you. Now, as we all are aware, now, okay, as somebody said, this is, I don't want you to come here Saturday all the way, drive from your home and get a 101 on the project management. So these are just slides that you can ignore, actually. But as we all know as project management professionals, our life is all about dealing with the iron triangle. We deal with the scope, schedule, and the resources trade-off. Technically speaking, project management would not be needed or would not exist if schedule and resources were infinite, right? I mean, if Shah Jahan is building Taj Mahal and he says, cost, no bar, resources, no bar. You want 10,000 people? Go ahead. You want 20,000 people? Go ahead. Then why do you need project management? Then he says, okay, it will take 10 years, go ahead and build. Or you say, no, I'll need another 5 years. Maybe you get another 5 years. So if the only reason why we need project management as a profession is when we see that there has to be a finite amount of what we have to deliver in finite amount of time and with finite amount of cost. And hence, our roles are really juggling these constraints. Because it's not to say that we love one constraint over other, but there are realities, right? So for example, some of you might remember when Y2K was a big thing, because Y2K was really the thing that this project cannot be rescheduled, because Y2K cannot be rescheduled, right? I used to be at Philips, we were doing consumer electronics, and consumer electronics in Europe, the biggest season for you to bring out your new television or your new VCR or your MP3 player used to be Christmas. And we used to say you can reschedule every project plan, but you cannot reschedule Christmas, right? So the point of view is that we depending on every kind of business we have always had, or if you are doing work for Olympics cannot be rescheduled. So depending on the kind of work you are doing, your constraints tend to be either fixed or variable here. And we are all familiar with the good old waterfall, right? So we started basically using the same thinking in building a waterfall. Well, in software industry, I think this was the biggest mistake we ever made, because we blindly copied manufacturing. In fact, if you now go to manufacturing and ask them, do you know waterfall? They will laugh at you. They'll say nobody does it in manufacturing. But the reality is 100 years back, we made this mistake of learning from Henry Ford and the way the cars were manufactured, and we just blindly copied that into software industry, because we said, if you can make 10,000 cars, then you can make 10,000 CDs as well. And we took the wrong metaphor of software development. Software development is a design problem, it's not a production problem. But the solution we took for a design problem was a production solution, which was the waterfall way of doing things. And that's why, so we ended up creating this scenario where even today, we should be ashamed of us as a profession. Even now, only one in 3 projects are successful. And this is the data from project management community, right? This is the Standish data, especially in the software industry. 1 in 5 projects are outright washout. Any other industry, Hari spoke so beautifully before it. Do you think Hari's industry would exist if 1 in 5 patient records or 1 in 5, it's like, hey, we are talking up from this hospital. You know what? Our track record is 1 in 5 patients never come back home. You'll say, come on guys, are you serious? Hey, we are calling you from Indigo Airlines. You know what? 1 in 5 planes don't land. Any other industry would be banned by this time, except software industry, except project management profession. So I think we need to understand that we are not the victims of bad project management. We are the perpetuators of bad project management. And as project managers, as certified certification holders, we have more responsibility. The responsibility is not to comply with what we have been taught. The responsibility is to question, why are we doing things the way we are doing it? Standish report is the world's most leading data on projects that have failed in the last 21 years. I would not doubt that there are data points here, but this is the reality. This is the sad reality that we must face here. In the new product development world, we still continue to look at the models that were developed in 60s and 70s, which was the stage gate process. Majority of the work that I do with my clients, we still continue to see a variant of a new NPD process, which is a stage gate kind of a thing. You have certain stage, then you do this, you might do a preliminary design, a detailed design, and so on. And then the whole thing, hopefully, will come out at the end of 24 months. So it's a long gestation period. By that time, the world changes, the technology changes, the people change. People don't even remember that you were building this product, right? Nobody has time of 24 months to wait for the product there, right? So, and if you look at the data points, the new product failure rates are alarming. In fact, this is one of the graphics that you will encounter on the net, where if you reverse trace the journey of one successful product launch, it actually has to start from 3,000 ideas. And then it goes through the Darwin process. And only at the end of it, you really get one successful product. And if you think, I do a lot of work with the startups. And startups are actually even bigger victims, because close to 90% of startups fail. They don't fail because they have bad people. They don't fail because they have less money. In fact, some of the recent data is there that actually if you have more money, then you are likely to fail. So it's not about having money, to be honest there. They just fail because they are solving the problem in a different manner. They are applying the principles of solving the problem, not with the right level of judgment, not with the right level of diligence, but with a wrong amount of blind compliance to whatever we have learned there. And so why is it really happening there, right? Let's examine that. Now, some of you might be familiar with the Stacy matrix. I like it. Some people don't like it, but I like it because this is a simple thing. So you take on the x-axis, on the x-axis you take actually on the y-axis you take what is the problem we are trying to solve. So what exactly is the thing? And on the x-axis you take how are we solving it. So on the y-axis you have the requirements, on the x-axis you have the technology. Now if you map the whole thing, you get some very interesting kind of a graph, and this is what Ralph Stacey wrote in his book. On the lower left corner you get a simple problem. What's a simple problem? We know what is to be done and we know how it is to be done. So let's say you have to build a Boeing aircraft. Now Boeing aircraft itself might be a very technically complex endeavor. I mean the engine that the Rolls-Royce makes has 20,000 components. But if you really honestly ask yourself, those 20,000 components, there is no research and development happening in that. There is no complexity, there is a complexity, but there is no uncertainty about it, whether this part will work or not. Because they have all been tested and there is a process to the whole thing. If you follow the process, you can put all the 20,000 parts together and build the engine. And the same way you can go about doing the Boeing aircraft. So as complex as something like a Boeing aircraft could be, but there is a method to the madness. In fact, it has come to the point, just do an image search on Google and just search for Toyota factory or something equivalent of that. And you will see stunning pictures of Toyota factory where there is not a single human being here. The only work that is being done is assembly of cars by robots. The point here is that the simple problems are the problem where we know exactly what is to be done and we know how it is to be done to the point that they can be automated. Today, nowadays in the IT industry, we are talking a lot about the automation and we are worried about the job losses. If you ask me, I think that's the best thing to happen. I mean, which human being wants to waste their life doing monotonous chores that do not add any value? Machines are certainly better than humans at doing those repetitive work there. If you go to the top right corner, which is anarchy or chaos kind of a zone there, these are the kind of problems where we don't know what is to be done. We know the vision, but we don't know what is to be done and we don't know how it's going to be done there. The best example that comes to my mind is the famous Kennedy Moon speech in 1962, when John F. Kennedy gave a vision to his country by saying, before the turn of the decade, we are going to send a man to the moon and bring him back alive. At that time, US did not have any idea how they are going to send a human being to the moon. Or take the case of Mangalyaan for India. No country had succeeded in the first time sending a mission to Mars. And India, we didn't know. I mean, there was no user manual available. Only 5 countries have done that kind of a thing there. So you are trying to deal with the problem and you don't really have a clue how the hell are you going to do that and what does it entail really. So how do you solve those problems? Can you put robots there? No. You need highly competent human beings because it's a very cognitive activity. It's something that human creativity and experimentation and knowledge, etc. is needed there. And you cannot just always get it right. You have to be prepared for failures. Startups is a classic example of that. And that is the reason when you work in the zone of anarchy, you cannot really apply a lot of principles of automation. You cannot even apply a lot of principles of project management. Now let's examine the same thing. So when you're dealing with the simple quadrant of problems, some of the models that work extremely well would be our typical project management models. A PMBOK would be a great fit for that. A CMM would be a great fit for that. A Six Sigma would be a great fit for that. But suppose you are all part of a company that is now known as Twitter, and we are sitting in 2005 when Twitter has not been created. How are you going to build a product? How are you going to decide what should be the length of a tweet? Can you do a market research on that? The world has not seen Twitter. So there is no way you know how to get it right or how to get it wrong. There is no concept of right or wrong, to be honest there. Right? Let's take another case, Amazon. I'm sure many of you have done shopping on Amazon. When you go on to what others are doing and recommending you that, hey, maybe you want to do that kind of a thing. How do you decide whether that's the right algorithm or not? There is no concept of right or wrong here. The traditional QA cannot be applied to that. The traditional planning doesn't matter here because everything is relative to what it is. And it has to be experimentation there, right? So when you are dealing with the simple problems, you cannot apply the same yardstick and say, okay, let's design this algorithm by following the conventional way of doing it. In fact, your algorithm will probably go into more of anarchy zone because you don't know what is the right answer. Like in case of Twitter, should it be 140 characters? Should it be 30 characters? Should it be 200 characters? Or should it be infinite scrolling? We don't know what is the right answer. And so do you. Nobody in the world has an idea about it. So how does Twitter or any other company decide? They do a lot of experimentation. Obama, when he joined the presidential campaign in 2008, he was not the outright leader. He was actually lagging behind everybody by double digits. And at that point in time, he reached out to some people who were designing a social media campaign. And there was a very simple page there where there was a media clipping and there was a button. So there was a media clipping, maybe Obama is playing with his family, or he's playing with his dogs, or he's having some fun moment with his daughters. And then there was this button there which said, count me in, or I want to donate or something. And they wanted to go live with this campaign. And at that point in time, they said, hey, we don't know whether this is the best media clipping and the best button. So they said, what are the options available? And they said, hey, we have 6 different media clippings. So one is Obama with his dog, one is Obama with his family, one is Obama with his wife. And then there were the 4 button options they narrowed down on. Now you might say a button is a button is a button. Come on, I mean, we are in 2017. Why are we talking about the size, shape, and color of a button here? But wait till I tell you the full story. So they said 6 into 4, 24 combinations of media and button are there. Let's do what we call as an A/B testing. That means all the people who come to our site will get one of these 24 combinations randomly thrown out at them, and we will look at how much is the conversion of people. So they looked at the conversion of that. They found combination number 11 actually had the highest conversion of 11%. Other combination was 8%. Initially they were going with 8%. That means out of 100 people who come to Obama's website, only 8% will donate $21 to him. But with the combination 11, they found that 11% people were willing to do that. You know how much of that difference translated to? $60 million. A lot of people believe that not only Obama got a great social traction from his social media campaign, but he was also able to get an additional $60 million that actually was instrumental in his win, because he had more money to spend on the media campaign. Obama was not happy with 2008. In 2012, when he went for the re-election, he did many more experiments like that. So how do you solve a problem like that if you are a campaign manager for an Obama, or you don't have to talk so much? We had a wonderful session by Ms. Swati earlier. You are designing a social campaign for improving the lives of people there. How do you know that that's the right campaign? It is not a well-formed problem. There are too many unknowns and too many variables in that. That problem will go into an anarchy zone, because you don't know. It is equivalent to a man landing on moon. It's equivalent to a Mars rover for the first time there, because you don't know what is the right way to solve the problem there. And the way people are solving these problems are purely by literally experimentation. Now, it's not really just take a hammer and start hitting there, but it's a little more scientific way of doing that thing. So we'll talk a little about that, but I hope the context is kind of clear and set there that first, there is no one-size-fits-all problem. The problems come in different colors. Secondly, there cannot be a single solution for solving every class of problems. The solutions also have to be commensurate to the kind of problem we are solving. Now, how do we really solve the problems? If you are solving the problem, for example, it could be India's polio campaign, or it could be, Hari was talking about something and I was reminded of, I was just mentioning it to him that in 1853, London used to be a gutter. And London had this major problem of sewage treatment actually. And at that point in time, cholera had not been discovered in the same way. And there was an incident in August of 1853 when 700 deaths happened in London in just a period of one week alone. And there was a very famous doctor, John Snow, who actually, there's a lovely book on that, The Ghost Map, where probably he was the first data scientist actually, because he went out and he created the first map of the deaths happening in each of these localities. He didn't know, people until that time believed that cholera happens because of air. And there was even a term in English which is known as miasma. Miasma is like the dull, stale air. Nobody believed John Snow. He was a doctor. He's the guy who invented anesthesia. So if any of you ever had a root canal and you feel happy about the fact that you didn't have to suffer pain, you should thank John Snow for that. And when he went out to people and said cholera is happening because of water, nobody believed him. Right? Because he was solving the kind of problem which is more on the left side of it, which is like a research kind of a thing there. He didn't know the right solution for that. And that's typically how we solve the problems. When we start something new, it is very crazy. We are doing all kind of things. We do experimentation. We fail so many times. I mean, Thomas Edison is known to have said, I haven't failed 1,000 times. I have found 999 ways how it's not going to work. And that has to be the mindset of the people who are solving the problem at that time. Eventually, at some point in time, we start getting the clarity, and then we get into the point where we can actually create a process out of it. I mean, look at the fact that, imagine, just go back close your eyes and think, who would have made the first cup of tea in the world? The story says that there was a Chinese monk sitting and the tree fell down and all that in the hot water that he was drinking. But imagine, today if you have to teach somebody how to make a cup of tea, you can close your eyes and tell the process and say, oh, do this, boil this, do this, put this, let it brew for some time. But if tea has not been invented, how will you teach somebody how to make a cup of tea? There will be a lot of experimentation in that process involved. So when we talk of process, what we forget the fact is that a process can only be done for something that we understand every step of that, not at the time when we are still doing an experimentation, because honestly we don't know what's going to work there. So this is how we typically do a problem solving, especially when we are doing something for the first time. We do a lot of things, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work, but we keep eliminating the ones that don't work and then get to the point of doing it. So how do we really solve such kind of a problems? Traditional project management, whenever we have applied, hasn't really given us the right results there. One of the ideas that I love the whole thing is the design thinking approach. Some of you might be familiar with that, where basically we solve the problems not in a very linear, sequential, single pass, one-way method, like a waterfall. But we actually solve the problems in a very iterative, non-linear, experimental kind of a thing there, where there are a lot of feedback loops and we keep learning here. So how it happens is, the first thing you see on the left side is empathy. The first thing that we want to use is develop a lot of empathy about the people who are going to live with the solution. See, one thing especially in the technology world, I think we are worst at is, we think people are as smart as we are. And they will figure out how to do that thing, right? So we make these complex solutions. But design thinking is, I'll give you some examples just so that you are able to relate to what I'm saying. Empathy is all about respecting the point of view of people who are going to deal with the solution on a daily basis, and not really imposing our point of view or our opinion or our perspective or our frame of reference on them, right? So we try to learn more about the problem, and then we go to the point of saying, I might know the solution, but at this point in time, I'm going at the point of view of saying, maybe there are better solutions here. My job as a designer is not to impose my choice of solution on the people, but my role as a designer, as a solution designer, is really to involve my audience, is to really engage with the people, with the community that I'm working with, and together we find what is the best way of solving the problem, right? So we don't zero down to one solution immediately, but we go into what we call as a divergent thinking. A divergent thinking is literally a blue sky kind of a thinking. I mean, you might come up, you say, okay, let all the ideas come on the table. Let there be 10,000 ideas on the table. I don't care if they are ridiculous, they are atrocious, they are audacious, they are stupid. I don't care. Because one of the things about creativity is that the moment you tell your idea is dumb, what do you think that person is going to do? Shut up. The best way to make sure that employees leave you is to tell them that your ideas are dumb. They will be permanently disengaged from your organization. So when we do a creativity, we should never be stopping that process. We should continue and say, okay, we are not going to judge it right now. We are going to suspend the judgment until the time everyone has had a chance to bring their ideas on the table. And then we are going to talk about that. Then we go to the point of defining it and saying, oh, maybe this is really the problem there. Who knows what is the real problem here? We start narrowing it down, and then we again go in. So that is a convergent thinking. We start converging the ideas. Then we again flare up into the create when we are looking at solutioning here and saying, hey, what are the ways can we do the solutioning of that? Again, we are doing a divergent thinking. Then we start building a prototype and say, yeah, maybe this idea may not be commercially viable. This idea may not be acceptable to the people. Let's do some prototypes. We zero it down to 3, 4, 5, 10 prototypes there. It is exactly like Obama's campaign where he was doing it. I'll give you another example from a non-political bank. Some of you might have heard of a bank in US known as Capital One Bank. I don't know if anyone is even working for them or not. But Capital One Bank is a fairly young bank, has been around for 30 years, but it's a $30 billion bank, close to that. Very few banks in the world probably have just been, in 30 years, they've become a $30 billion bank. Now, one of the things that as a new bank they said was, hey, we don't know what is the right way to build the products. But we know one thing, the best way to learn is to make a lot of mistakes. So we are going to make a lot of mistakes. Now people say, hey, but you are a bank, you have a regulatory environment, you have all kind of rules and regulations. They say, yeah, we have rules and regulations, we are a bank, but we are still going to do a lot of experiments. So they do tons and tons and tons of experiments. In 2015, they did 80,000 big data experiments. Everything is done as an experiment there. So they did 80,000 big data experiments, exactly like how Obama did an experiment for his presidential campaign. And you know how many times they succeed in that? Any guesses? What might be the success rate of the experiments that they do? 1%. I'm sure that some of you must be wondering, oh, if it was my current manager, he would have fired him, given him a PIP by now. That's where the culture of the company becomes very important there. You are telling that, hey, it is perfectly okay to screw up in this company. In fact, we want people who have the courage to screw it up. We don't want people who are playing too close to the foul line and they are scared of taking some risks. We want people who are willing to break things here. Because we know that if you want to build a $30 billion business in 30 years, by playing the rules of what it is, it's not going to happen. In fact, there is a very recent article by Steve Blank, where he actually questions and says, the only people who have really become successful are the people who have broken the rules, who have done illegal stuff. Now, don't take it too literally. Right? We are not talking about Al Capone here. Take the case of Uber. Uber, the current model in pretty much every country is that Uber is illegal because commercial sharing of tariff between passengers is banned. Take New York. The medallions that New York has only 13,000 cabs, and the medallions that the New York cab drivers get is sold for $1 million. Obviously, and then there are these 40,000 Uber cabs there. Technically speaking, Uber is banned by the existing laws there. I live in Bangalore. Every day I think we hear that the Karnataka government is doing a flip-flop whether Uber Mobike should be allowed or Uber ride share should be allowed, or is it legal or illegal and all. But the reason why Uber has a $70 billion valuation is not because Uber became yet another taxi service. The reason it is $70 billion is because it says, I'm going to break these rules. I'm going to challenge this status quo. I'm going to do things in the most unexpected manner here. And that is how they are trying to solve the problems here, right? And that's where, so the design thinking is really an approach of solving the problems, not with the mind that I have a ready-made solution, let me just go and implement it, but really understanding the context deeper and then designing the right solution, keeping the people in mind. Remember, we are not developing solutions for machines. The solution for machines are already done in the last one that I showed here, which is really in the simple quadrant, because they are getting automated anyways. We are developing solutions for human beings, and when it comes to human beings, we don't quite know what is the right way of doing it. And at some point in time, maybe it will become automated, but today, the starting point for us is discovery of that. And it is an iterative way of doing it. It's not like a single pass, one-way kind of a traffic flow. It is iterative. We keep looking back at it. We keep refining the solutions. It is also not a very linear thing. In fact, design thinking, sometimes when people look at the process, they think, oh, this looks like a waterfall process. It's just another name for it. It It's only pictorial representation that we unfortunately cannot express that on a paper, but it is anything but linear. In fact, it is, to somebody who is not trained as a design thinker, it will look like, hey, what are these guys doing there? But there is a method to the madness there, right? Let's look at some of the examples of how people do that, right? And just before that, it's not just a process alone. In fact, while design thinking, if you ask somebody, hey, do you have a process? A design thinker would almost cringe in saying, no, I don't really believe there is a process. I think the mindsets are more important there. So, for example, the Stanford Design Thinking School, also known as the D School, they have identified these 7 major mindsets. They believe that these mindsets are required, without which you can have a design thinking process, but you are not going to solve the problems in the right way. So, focus on human values. Show, don't tell. Don't really create too much of complex things there. Embrace experimentation. We are not going to get it right, whether it is Obama's campaign or whether it is Capital One's 80,000 big data experiments. These are all experimentations, right? Be mindful of the process, even though we are saying that these are mindsets, but to an extent there is some kind of a process going on. Okay, we are doing divergent thinking, now we are converging the ideas. We might have to do them 10,000 times, doesn't matter, but there is still some kind of a process to the whole thing. Bias towards action. When we talk of design thinking, sometimes people think, oh, these are 5 people sitting in a corner room in the office and they are like saying we are doing design thinking. It's like with mantras and all that thing, put some Zen music and all. In fact, design thinking is anything but that. We say, in fact, the whole thing in design thinking is to build something tangible and bring it out in front of people and say, go ahead, kill this product. I want to see whether you hate it or like it. If I keep it in my mind, then there is no fun there. I mean, how many of you were trained as a mind reader? None of us can read anybody's mind. The only way we can communicate our ideas is by putting something tangible on the table and saying, this is what it is, what do you think about it, right? Radical collaboration. In the innovation world, one of the big things that people don't understand is, it takes a village to raise a child. Unfortunately, we still have these superhero stories that, oh, it was an Edison sitting in, like he was the superstar, or it was Marie Curie who was the superstar, or it was one person as a lone genius myth. Data is coming out slowly which is telling, in fact, Edison was anything but a lone genius. Edison had the world's best glass technician working for him. Edison had trained electrical guys who knew the metallic, they were working on the metal research working for him. Edison had a team of about a dozen people who were helping him. There are researches that are done, for example, in the last 100 years, the number of papers that have been published in the peer-reviewed double-blind journals, the number of submissions is going up by 20% for those that have more than one author. So there is no such thing as a lone genius. If you are collaborating, only then the chances are that you will be successful. That's becoming loud and clear now. So, and that's the same thing here. And then craft clarity. Nobody has time to really understand and do a PhD in how to operate things there. People want simple stuff there. Nowadays, everybody is using a smartphone at home, right? A 1-year-old child as well. And they are going to grow up and they are going to question your dumb rules and dumb products and say, I don't like it. I want simple stuff there. Like, when is the last time any of you ever read a user manual? Thank you, sir. 1 or 2, yeah. I mean, we have stopped doing it, right? There is a user manual for everything. It is known as Google or YouTube. Nobody reads user manual anymore. People don't have patience for doing it. So, craft clarity, right? So, these are the things there. Let's look at some examples and then I'll wrap it up. So, okay, any of you have had the misfortune of being in an MRI, on an MRI table? Okay, I'm sure the experience was reasonably painful, 45 minutes, cold, metallic stuff, right, that kind of a thing there. What they found was that for children it is even more painful. In fact, we are supposed to save the lives of children and you know what happens? Maybe in India, it's more of a US statistics. 80% of the children that have to be scanned on an MRI actually have to be sedated. It's so painful for them because they don't like to, it's so difficult for them to do that. So they said, how do we solve that problem? Technology, there's nothing wrong in that. And this was a guy known as Doug Dietz. Doug Dietz worked at GE Healthcare for 20 years. He built these machines. And he felt pained by the fact that he was building machines that were torturing children. They were supposed to save the lives of those children, but he was not able to help them. So here is what they did there, and whatever you are going to see in this picture, it doesn't even look like an MRI scanner. It looks like some fun kind of a place there. So GE came up with these adventure series where they basically created a new set of MRI scanners where they actually were piloted, they were modeled like a pirate island or a treasure island kind of a thing. And it was not just about some cheap decals there, it was a storytelling immersive experience. The children would go as a hero and then the technician would say, hey champion, what do you want to do today? Let's go and kill the pirates there. And hey, you have to lie still there on the table there because if you move, the pirates will know that you are there. The result? Before 80% of the children had to be sedated, it came down to 10%. By doing nothing other than just changing the whole environment to be more embracing, less intimidating, more immersive, more engaging environment there, right? It is not about technology. What you are seeing here was zero technology contribution, but we solved the problem in a dramatically different manner. Take another example. I don't know, I have not been there, but if any of you had chance to go inside a slum, most of the slums are dark and dingy places. There are people who have grown up in darkness. Most of them do not get any sunlight there. How do you solve the problem for them? You cannot just go and say, hey, I mean, you cannot do an equivalent of the French Queen Mary and say, oh, they don't have bread, let them eat cake. That's not going to work out. So how do you solve the problem in literally lighting up their lives? And here's what somebody came up with an idea 20 years back. He just took a 1 liter Pepsi bottle, put distilled water in that, put baking soda in that, and just popped it onto the roof of that, and immediately the house had 55 watts of electricity. It's known as a liter of light because it comes from a liter of bottle actually. Probably it takes less than 1 rupee or 2 rupees to even build something like that. But look at the elegance of the whole solution here. These are the people who have never seen light in their lives. This kind of a problem cannot be solved by people like you and I sitting in these fancy 5-star offices that we are used to. It requires a genuine dosage of empathy. And the only way we gain that empathy is when we go down and step into and sit with them in the same shoes, in the same trenches there. And that's the important, and that's the fun part of the whole design thinking here. Close to 5 lakh babies in India and South Asia die within the first 1 hour alone. And probably that number goes up to about 2 million or so in the first 24 hours. The biggest challenge is in places like northern UP and Uttaranchal and Nepal, where the hilly places are there and the temperature drops down suddenly very low and they are not able to, and the electricity, well, we know the state of electricity in our country. It's even worse in those remote hilly regions there. So there are cases where the incubators shut down and it just happens there, right? So they came up with the idea of saying, I mean, somebody fancy might say, hey, why don't we build a fancy kind of a thing, runs on generator, battery backup, all those kind of a things. They said, no, none of this kind of a thing works. They experimented a lot and then they found that the best solution is actually what they have come up with, Embrace Infant Warmer, which actually is sterilizable. You can put in hot water. There are pockets in which you can put hot water pockets and it saves lives. In fact, they did a similar experiment in Africa. They found that, well, you give a $40,000 equipment in Africa or in many other developing countries, and that's the only time the system works because you don't have funds to maintain that thing. So how do you really make sure that a baby warmer or an incubator is going to work even 3 years or 5 years after there? It's a design problem. If you apply the mind of it, say, okay, why don't we get some funds? It doesn't work that way. So they said, let's go and find out what is that one thing that always continues to work in these countries. Can you guess? I mean, just try to imagine a rural place where electricity is not there, so maybe they bought a fridge or they bought something and then after 1 year it dies down. But there is one thing that always works in those areas. Well, okay, so solar is a little bit of an elitist urban solution. Hot water, okay. So, okay, different solution, let me in the interest of time say. They saw that in all these places, the one thing that always works is a car. It might be in a broken condition, but somehow they make the car running there. So they said, that is one thing where we will get the spare parts anywhere. Why don't we build a baby warmer or an incubator out of the parts of a car? We are always assured of the spare part supply. And they have actually done, if you just do a Google on that, Africa incubator car, I'm sure you will land at the right page there. They built an incubator that got an award for design actually because that makes sure that you will never run out of supply parts. They have actually designed, the lights are the headlights of the car, that kind of a thing there. So that is the way people are solving the problem, not by taking a thing and saying, okay, why don't we throw money at the problem and solve the problem here. This is OXO is world famous for the kitchen equipment they build. But the CEO of OXO, his wife actually had arthritis problem, and she complained to her husband and said, hey, you guys don't make it right one for people like me who has an arthritis problem, this is not good one. So he said, hey, we have been thinking only about the quality of the peeler, but we have never really bothered about the grips. And that's when they realized that there are a lot of people who actually have problem in holding something properly. So why don't we design the one with the right grips there? So that's the kind of thing they started doing it. So OXO Good Grips Peeler is probably the best product of its kind, and their grips has become synonymous with the kind of product quality they have, right? Iron is a big problem. The lack of iron. So this was especially in Vietnam and other places. There was a time when we used to cook in iron vessels, right? So we used to get the daily supplies of it. But how do you give it to people when they are not cooking in iron vessels anymore there? Well, they said, why don't you do one thing, take just a block of iron and just put it there when you are making the stew there. That looks ugly, and like, how do you really solve the problem? And they came up with a very elegant solution, and this was in Vietnam. They actually built something that they call as a lucky iron fish. And actually the fish is a very auspicious symbol for people in Vietnam and Cambodia and many other places. And by designing the product with the right kind of a form factor and shape, they were actually able to, so when you are doing your stew, you just put there and cook for the next 1 hour, take it out, clean, hygienic, reuse that. Over a period of time, it replenishes iron in your body, right? To come up with solutions like these, you cannot really think like and saying, okay, I think, oh, why don't you give them iron supplements and that solves the problem. That's not what we are able to do there, right? Water wheel. I'm sure if you go on Google's image search and search India water village, you will invariably see a woman carrying water on her head there. How do you give dignity back to her life? This has been a problem for years and years and years, thousands of years in our country. No one thought of it until actually somebody from US thought of it, and she built such an elegant solution here. This is known as a water wheel. The water is inside the wheel, just put it there and just keep rolling. You can go anywhere in the world with that, right? You give her that dignity back in life because she is not really going to carry the whole thing, and she can just go and doing it. And lastly, I want to talk about an example from Hyderabad itself. You might be wondering, we don't have enough experiment ideas. So this happened, this is in Nandi Foundation, maybe some of you might have heard of it. The problem is most places in India have an open well where the water is contaminated and all that. So Nandi Foundation came up with the idea of building these kind of water clinics, water centers, where people can just go and buy clean water. But when they started offering it, they realized that people were not coming forward to buy water. It was not the problem of distance. It was much closer to the open wells. It was not a question of quality. The quality was extremely high compared to the open well. It was not a question of money. It was, they had to pay for the water, but they actually had very small amount of money to be paid there. Even then, people were not coming forward to buy the water. Can you think of why? Anyone? Carry was very close to that. It's in the right direction there. Come again? So carry vessels, okay, let me tell you what really happened. So they found that they had to actually carry water in these kind of vessels, which were like big 10, 15 liter jerry cans. And what was happening was that invariably the women could not carry the water by themselves. So they had to sit on the back of a two-wheeler and hold it. And they could only sit on the back of a two-wheeler when some man was kind of driving, the man of the family. And invariably in the daytime, the man would be away at work and come in the evening there. By the time the man in the family comes, the center shuts down. It's a very long-winded argument, but if you and now that I have told you, you will say, come on, they should have thought of it. But they did not think of it. This is not a technology problem. This is a social problem. How do you deal with those kind of things there? So these were some of the ways in which people solved. The solution was just reduce the form factor of the jerry can so that people can just carry it if they need to carry there, right? So some of these things, now I know I've run out of time, but I'll take another just couple of minutes. How does it relate to the future of project management, especially what we are discussing here? Well, a lot of problems that we are seeing, robotics, AI, other things are becoming suddenly very important. This is a paper that came out last month by APM, the Association for Project Management in UK, and they actually found that India actually is the #1 country when it comes to the concern of robotics and cognitive computing and AI. So it is a real thing that it is staring at us. A lot of things that I talked about might seem like, oh, we don't have to worry about it, it's all a first world problem. But you know what, in India actually we are the #1 concerned with this kind of a thing there. Or if you look at the augmented workforce, gig economy, people, temporary jobs, this again India is scoring the highest actually in these. So some of these are big trends that are going to have a major impact on how the project management will shape up in the coming time here. And some of the key drivers they have talked about, I'll not have time to go into them, but maybe I can refer it on time. Lastly, just to complete it, I think the future looks very scary, and to me it's very interesting. This is the Deloitte report in 2017. They said the robots and cognitive technologies are making steady advances, particularly in jobs and tasks that follow set standardized rules and logic. As I showed you in the Stacy matrix, any job that you are going to do which is a repetitive kind of a thing, I think you should be worried about it. If you don't skill yourself, a robot is going to replace you. I think that's written in, you can write in blood. I think it's going to happen there. And the future, they actually painted the future of how it's going to look like. So they actually have done a small, they say it's in year 2040, project management, second paragraph, project management has become known as the last profession in a world where increasingly capable systems have gradually replaced professionals across the world. Project managers still provide the irreplaceably human combination of leadership, integration of specialist and ethical behavior. I think to me, the project management profession will be relevant in 20 years for things that are going to have a social and human context. Anything that's going to be a repetitive, process-driven approach will get replaced. As soon as the economics of technology overtakes the economics of human labor, it will go away. We have seen that happening. In 80s, we used to talk about computerization in railways. I remember when Rajiv Gandhi and Sam Pitroda, they started talking about computerization, there was all this kind of a thing, oh, the jobs will go away, jobs will go away. But you know what? It has actually the opposite has happened there. More jobs have come. Only thing is they are higher skilled than what they were before there, right? So I think that will continue to happen. Project management, in my view, will continue, but the way we practice it, the way we profess it, it's going to change because the cost of technology would have overtaken would have reduced to the point that the cost of manual labor, it is not economical doing it anymore. Right? So let me just finally recap the points here. In my view, the traditional project management approach worked very reasonably well for well-defined problems. I mean, if you said, I have to make 10,000 Ford T-model cars, T20 cars, that is the best thing there, because now you can repeat the same process there. However, it is common to work with ill-defined problems, for example, unclear boundaries, or ambiguous problem, not enough knowledge, there is no single right solution and so on. And I'm sure all of you are probably dealing with some elements of that already in your jobs, right? We are not dealing with something which is like, there's been a saying in software industry for last 50 years, it has been saying that walking on water and developing software is easy if only both are frozen. But even then we have been hoping that by doing my waterfall, I'm going to be able to develop software. We know it's not going to happen. Have you ever seen your requirements completed? But we have all done the faithful part of freezing the SRS and then doing a change request and then doing a CCB. We have been wasting our time all these years, right? Design thinking and other bunch of ideas. I'm not saying design thinking is the best. I just took that as one of the topics for my talk today. Offers a better approach to solving the problems by alternately applying divergent and convergent thinking, and it's really touching the whole creative aspects of solutioning that in my view is probably going to help us solve those problems better. So project management by all means, but the way we interpret, the way we apply, the way we practice the principles, I think it has to change in the way in light of the fact that we are not dealing with well-boxed problems, but these are very loose kind of things have to be there. I'm sorry I took more time, but that's where I would end here. I don't know if I have time for any questions or not, but thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Verma. That was a wonderful session. We're running out of time, so the questions can be taken during the break. You can go personally and have a chat with him.
Thank you.
No, just stay there.
Okay.
Robos for everything. Robos for everything. I'm sure, I just saw one show, Jimmy Fallon, anybody? Sophia is one of the robos that's taking care of relationships too. It's pretty creepy, but she'll answer all your questions and talk and even, have expressions with the eyebrows and all that. Looks really close to human. So we're going in, totally in a, design thinking is taking us to some other different level, totally. Yeah, Mr. Sriram, can you come and hand over the memento to Mr. Verma? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.